What is Squadron 42? Is it gonna be any good after 10 years of development? Is it going to fulfill your fantasies of being a space marine, mowing down aliens, exploring new worlds, and destroying enemy capital ships in epic scale space battles? And how will Star Citizen be affected by that? Hello, my name is Grumpy Eye, and let's talk about it after the intro.
Hello, my name is Grumpy, Grumpy Eye.
As you may know, Squadron 42 is a single-player game set in Star Citizen's universe, and it is currently being developed by Cloud Imperium Games. It is a story-driven, action-packed adventure game that has some of the biggest Hollywood names acting in it. Gary Oldman, Mark Hamill, Mark Strong, Liam Cunningham, Gillian Anderson, Henry Cavill, these are just some of the names from the list of numerous actors that have worked on this project alongside Chris Roberts. Squadron 42 promises to be a revolution in gaming and the biggest open-world single-player game up to date, with an amazing story of the human race fighting for their survival against a much stronger and bigger army of some scary-ass aliens. But it wasn't always like that. Back in 2012, during the Kickstarter phase of Star Citizen's funding, Squadron 42 was announced to be a single-player game mode for Star Citizen. Back then, it was said that once you finish the single-player campaign, you will be able to jump into the persistent universe of Star Citizen and play with or against other players, build your own bases on faraway moons, and fill a role that you want to fill in a universe where you can be whatever you want to be, or should I say in an MMO that we were all promised. Squadron 42 was announced to be released by 2014 with the release of Star Citizen, and then it got postponed to 2016, just to be pushed back indefinitely, or as Cloud Imperium Games would say, it will be released when it's ready. And in 2016, the developers have decided to split Star Citizen and Squadron 42 into two separate games that still share the same engine, the same game mechanics, and the same universe around them, but you will still need to buy them separately. Then in 2020, there was some talk about a beta of Squadron 42 coming out, but that was pushed back too, probably because of COVID. Then in 2021, Carl Jones, the COO of Cloud Imperium Games, or the development team behind Squadron 42 and Star Citizen, gave an interview to MCV Develop magazine where he said that they will be making sequels to Squadron 42. And then a question imposes itself. How can they plan sequels for something that is not even released yet? And that reminds me of the time where I was called by a band here in Serbia that wanted to book me and my studio, my music studio, for a few hours. So they came to my studio and they told me that they just have a few hours because they have a video shoot planned already. And we had to do a song and we had to record or track the vocals and all of that, and I was like, yeah, okay, fine, we can try. Like, it's not how things work, but yeah, we can try it. So we started recording, and during the tracking session, I realized that they want to film a video, like a music video, for the song that we are currently doing. And I was like, are you guys serious? Like, that's not gonna work. And of course, nothing went as planned or as they have planned because, yeah, like the lead singer got stuck in my bathroom because the door handle broke off and it took us like half an hour to get him out. And then the rapper that was supposed to like have an appearance in that song, he was late, and then when he arrived, he didn't have his lyrics with him. And then he had to like write down new lyrics, and like he wasn't even good at it. And to cut the story short, we did something. We made something, and then they went off to film a video for it, and it was, of course, as disastrous as the song was. So they never released it, and the moral of the story is be open-minded, but not so much that your brain falls out. Well, let's come back to Squadron 42, and let's not talk about sequels just yet. Let's try to see how much progress has been made since its announcement in 2012. Well, the short answer is that we don't really know. We know that the actors have done a lot of mocap recording back in 2015 and 16, and that's it basically. We've had a few trailers and an hour-long gameplay video back in 2018, and most of the footage from this video is comprised of those videos. We also have monthly reports on what has been done for Squadron 42, and those are very important for us since most of it ends up in Star Citizen, because Squadron 42 is still basically a single-player game mode for Star Citizen, even though it's being funded by Star Citizen's money, and we still gotta pay for Squadron 42? I don't get it. But with those monthly reports, they keep on telling us what they have done, but not how much of the work is left. My guess is, or my hope is, that the actors have already recorded all the voice lines and all of the motion capture stuff, because if that's not the case, that will mean that Squadron 42 is not even close to release. But we don't know that. All that we know is that they're working on it, and that's it. But since Squadron 42 shares the same engine with Star Citizen and all the core game mechanics should practically be the same, let's try to figure out if all of the core mechanics for a single-player space shooter are even done yet. And there should be an emphasis on that Squadron 42 is just a space shooter. So there's no point in us talking about salvage mechanics, farming, base building, or anything that Star Citizen promises, because at the end of the day, Squadron 42 is basically just a story-driven space shooter. Now, if we say that the story has been finished, and that the actors they have hired have finished their job successfully back in 2016, then the only things that are left are the game mechanics that are the integral parts of the game, and of course the environment in which the game is set in. Now, the last gameplay video update from 2018 showed us that the main story begins in the Vega system, but we know that the gameplay should extend into the Odin system, none of which are even close to being released in Star Citizen though, so we really can't say if those systems are finished or not. All that we know is that we should be getting Pyro and the Nyx systems soon in Star Citizen, so it's safe to say that we can put another question mark next to the environments because we don't really know if those are finished. All that we know is that the tools for procedural generation of planets and moons are being developed and that they are getting better and better, so it shouldn't take them that long to finish those systems. Although, being a single-player game, it will need to have a ton of hand-built stuff, such as cities, landing zones, and other points of interest that will be filled with assets that we can't really have in Star Citizen right now because the servers couldn't handle all the different models and assets. But they had years or decades to make them, so let's assume that this stage of development is also finished. Now we get to the core mechanics where the things get a little weird. Last year, Star Citizen has seen push-pull mechanics for trolleys, gurneys, and all of the other things that people love to push and pull so they can troll each other and block doors for other players. They were developed exclusively for Squadron 42 and made their way to Star Citizen, and that's one of the reasons why they are still buggy as hell, because it's a completely different story when you're coding for a game that's being hosted on your own PC and when you're coding something that is hosted on a server with a low tick rate, such as a multiplayer game. But that is just an example of how these games are intertwined and how everything is shared between them. Another example would be the looting mechanics and the inventory system that got introduced to Star Citizen this year. They are really bad because they were made for Squadron 42, so I assume that most of the features were not released to Star Citizen because the servers couldn't handle them. For example, a button that will move everything from one inventory to another. But since we don't exactly know which mechanics are planned for Squadron 42, we can only speculate. But I don't want to do that with this video. Instead, I want to focus on the mechanics that we have in Star Citizen and that are shared with Squadron 42. For example, ship-to-ship combat is about to change again, drastically, and Cloud Imperium Games has stated that they will slow down their ships so we can have better fights. That means that they will change the flight models of all the ships, and since those are shared between both games, I would assume that Squadron 42 will not be released until that is introduced to the game or to Star Citizen. As you can see, even the HUD elements have changed, and then on top of that we have the capacitor mechanics that were introduced a few patches ago. It would be unreasonable to expect that Squadron 42 has flight and combat mechanics that completely differ to the ones seen in Star Citizen. Now the second thing would be the inventory system that I have mentioned, even though it's surely running better when it's hosted hosted client side. We know that this is just a tier 1 implementation and that there will be more features added to the whole mechanic, because you really don't want your single player game to have an inventory system that takes you into the third person and then the camera gets stuck in a wall outside of the elevator or in the box next to you. The third thing would be the FPS combat that CAG has stated that they are currently working on or that is currently being reworked. Fourth thing would be the FPS radar and scanning and the EVA rework, or should I say a rework of spacewalking mechanics. The fifth thing would be the GravLab mechanics. Even though we have just seen a rework of those, we are not very happy with them. And if Squadron 42 has any GravLab action, that needs to be reworked too. And the list goes on, and all of those things need to be refined before the game's release. For example, the developers have been saying that they will slow down ship-to-ship combat for more than 2 years now, but we still don't know when or how it's going to change. So if we just look at the core mechanics, I believe that we are not even close to release of Squadron 42, at least until the developers settled on how the core mechanics should look like. And now we're getting to the hot topic of this video, or the main problem with Squadron 42 or how it affects Star Citizen. I believe that this is going to be released at some point, yes, but is it going to be as good as it should after all those years of development? It sure as hell needs to be. Because since the developers decided to prioritize Squadron 42, it started slowing down the progress of Star Citizen. And this has been going on for years now. And some people would even say that Squadron 42 was always the priority, but that the devs never wanted to tell us that. Now, once it gets released, here lies the first problem. If it's amazing, people will want more, and Cloud Imperium Games have already announced sequels, so that means that the sequels will most certainly prolong the development of Star Citizen even more, but more on that later. But what happens if it's bad? That will be disastrous for Cloud Imperium Games, because they will have nothing to show except 2 failed projects. Star Citizen, that is an unfinished mess, and that is in an alpha stage for a decade now, and then they will add a single-player game that has been released, but it flopped. But here lies the biggest problem. What happens if it's just mediocre? I believe that it will also be a disaster for the company. First of all of the eyes of the gaming community will be focused on Squadron 42 once it gets released, not only because of it being in development for more than a decade, but because of all of the actors that we know and love that will attract a lot of attention to the game once it gets released. People will be nitpicky, and the media and the gaming community will overanalyze and dissect it just to tear it apart if it turns out to be nothing more than just a mediocre game. Especially if we take into consideration how many ambitious games like this one have been announced in the past few years and how many of them have flopped. If it turns out to be a buggy mess like Cyberpunk, Cloud Imperium Games will not be considered as a serious gaming company, because they will have nothing to show for themselves except 2 buggy projects. But what does that all mean for Star Citizen? Well, Star Citizen is heavily dependent on the success or the failure of Squadron 42. Firstly, because most of the funding went into Squadron 42 instead of Star Citizen. That funding will drop if Squadron 42 flops, and Cloud Imperium Games will not be able to sustain their development teams if we don't have a constant influx of new players, unless they entirely change their funding model. But if Squadron 42 ends up going viral and people love it, it will surely make a lot of money that could be put into Star Citizen. That's at least what the community hopes that will happen, but will it actually happen? Or will CAG continue making sequels for Squadron 42, which would again make the most of their developers unavailable to work on Star Citizen? That question imposes itself, because when you're running a company that sells a product that becomes very popular, you will want to milk that cow until it stops giving milk. And we have already seen how it all works with all the blockbuster movies and all the gaming franchises franchises. It doesn't matter if your main characters die at the end of a trilogy, you will revive them just to milk the cow a bit more for the fourth sequel, even though it's a trilogy. Or you will replace them with younger generic copies of them that have nothing to do with the original movies just so you can continue the franchise. Also, there is another question that it poses itself that I couldn't answer, and that one is, when the hell are we gonna get Squadron 42? It's been around the corner for the past 6 years now. But I believe that we will get no answers to these questions until Chris Roberts himself decides that Squadron 42 is ready to be released, and then we will see if that game is going to fund Star Citizen's development or if it's still going to slow it down like it did for years now. Unless the game flops, of course, then Star Citizen might actually go down with it, because new players will be hesitant to even give Star Citizen a chance after that. And let's be honest, even if Squadron 42 succeeds, most players are not interested in playing an MMO game, so we shouldn't expect a huge influx of players even if Squadron 42 delivers on being the game it promises to be. So let's say that the game succeeds and it becomes like a new GTA or a game of the year even, I would assume that only 30% of people that have played it would even consider giving Star Citizen a go. All in all, this is a really sticky situation for Cloud Imperium Games, and they will have to release the best single-player space game ever if they want to sustain their company for years and years to come. But what does that mean for us, the backers of Star Citizen? Well, it means that we have a long and a winding road ahead of us, and that the future of Star Citizen will be even more uncertain the closer we get to Squadron 42's release date, unless of course we get some assurance by the developers that we should be confident about its future, but we know that's not gonna happen. So that is it for today, guys. Thank you for watching, and thank you to all my patrons that are supporting the channel. If you want to support the channel, there's going to be a link down in the description of the video, and yeah, it's a Patreon link, so you can like drop a few bucks there. There's also a join button on YouTube, but like YouTube takes 30%, which is like a bit too much. So yeah, again, thank you for watching, and don't forget to bring a towel when you're traveling through space, and mwah.